Fallout 76 is quite unlike any other Bethesda Game Studios title. The team's creation engine returns from Fallout 4, but the online focus pairs you with 3 co-op allies and dozens in the lobbies to share along in the spoils. World size increases too. To match the move to 4 players, the terrain is also said to be quadruple the size of Fallout 4's. But with this 4K footage taken straight from an early Xbox One X preview build, it poses a few questions. Is this the next evolutionary step for Bethesda's engine, 3 years on from Fallout 4? And for X support, has the time come for more visual features to make the most of the hardware? What must be said right away is this is early code, and clearly work in progress. Bethesda's particular approach to game design also demands a lot of QA testing to get right, and Fallout 76 will be no exception. There are bugs and performance drops in this footage, and Bethesda promises that newer builds fix many of the issues we're seeing here. So a full release is penned for November 14th, and a beta kicks off on October 23rd if you fancy that, which may show the game with more polish. With that in mind, we'll be carrying out more detailed analysis of that public-facing code, but for now, this is more of an overview of the game, its features, and what the developers are setting out to achieve. Let's start with the obvious. The core appeal of Fallout 76 is that it now has a major online focus, a huge precedent for the series that has been predominantly an offline experience until now. Development is split with a new team to help with this, where Bethesda Game Studios Austin is employed to adapt the engine for online play. Formerly known as Battlecry Studios, this includes staff that worked on titles like Star Wars Galaxies and Ultima Online, so the credentials are very much there to make the concept come to life. With this in mind, Fallout 76 is as much the work of the Austin studio as the core Bethesda team. So how does this actually play? Well, the Fallout 4 engine is modified to fit an online network, meaning we have dedicated servers managing dozens of players in a single instance. The player count isn't on MMO levels, but they're all viewable right outside the vault, and it's impressive that you can see so much activity in one spot in the series. And all the craziness that goes with meeting other players online applies. Emoticons, dances, and bizarre character designs are par for course. Adding players creates a bizarre, carnival-like atmosphere that, for some, might intrude on the solo player fantasy Bethesda's worlds do so well to prop up. Balance and level progression are tied to the character too. There's nothing to stop you from playing completely alone. It caters for that. But for once, much of the game is built with this multiplayer aspect in mind. And it's great to see the idea implemented officially. We've seen fan-made mods for Skyrim attempting the same thing, but ultimately it's bolted onto a single-player game by design. Here, the enemies, loot system and progression, and not to mention ways to communicate, are fine-tuned from the start. Tellingly, this is running on the creation engine, rather than just the tech used for the Elder Scrolls Online. It means a big overlap with Fallout 4 technically, and we're in familiar territory. Looking close, the rendering setup is similar, especially in resolution. To put this into perspective, let's backtrack to Fallout 4. Xbox One X delivered the highest quality God rays and draw distances on console. It also boasted the highest resolution, dynamically adjusting from a full 3840 by 2160 down to 3264 by 2160, 85% of 4K. With temporal anti-aliasing to help it along, the X patch did a great job of getting a crisp image to an Ultra HD TV. What happens in this build of Fallout 76 though isn't quite what I'd expected. The basics stay the same. Yes, dynamic scaling stays in place, and yes, the vertical resolution always fixes natively at 2160 pixels just as before, while the horizontal runs the gamut between numbers, adjusting to load. 3840 by 2160 is the upper bounds, so that's a proper 4K, but I was surprised to see this early build running at 2880 by 2160 as the lowest reading on X. That number triggers once you leave the vault, which is worse than Fallout 4's lowest point from my testing in the infamously GPU taxing Corvega factory. 2880 by 2160 is 75% of 4K, and that res stays in place for the initial pathway down through the woodlands with your squad members. With that said, in Fallout 76's starting vault and dungeons, it's actually mostly 3840 by 2160, with parts only dipping to 3648 by 2160, or 95% scale. Optimization could change the situation, but is there any reason for the lower boundaries in resolution? Fundamentally, it's the rendering tech of Fallout 4, but now with a networking focus. The addition of 3 extra players in a squad is an extra tax on console resources, but equally the world is entirely new as well. Leaving Vault 76, you get a more autumnal natural world of flourishing hills and cliffs than we typically see in Fallout. It's more akin to the fantasy landscapes of Skyrim than the rust and rubble of Fallouts 3 and 4. This is in fairness only one of 6 major regions in the map, so there will be plenty of scope for variety later on. In terms of art design, Fallout 76 shows a wider variety. From Appalachia's open tracks to the flatwoods, the hotel and the uncanny caverns, the visual signature changes radically. But the fact is, the technology in this build is struggling to realise these concepts. The textures, for example, are often quite low resolution in this build, glaringly so, and it's hard to avoid the sense X's larger pool of memory could be pushed to produce better results. On the plus side, texture filtering runs at a high level of anisotropic filtering. Up to 16 times AF would be a reasonable estimate here, but again the concern here is the texture quality, which doesn't really stand up at 4K resolution in this early build. Let's consider the draw distances, which is a high point of this build. It's key to building any convincing game world, and Xbox One X retains the long rendering range on trees and buildings from Fallout 4. There is some pop-in, but the way trees are propagated across the landscape makes a genuinely great first impression in Fallout 76. Equally, there's the grass rendering. It's all 2D transparencies, but there's an abundance around the golf course with a crisp, voluminous look that happens to animate too. Under the volumetric lighting on the green, it leaves behind a rich, natural texture to the game I didn't see much of in the last Fallout. Now, there are parts of the level of detail system that don't look too great, notably shadows. Fallout 76 keeps the same approach to shadow rendering from the last game, but 3 years on, it's starting to show its age. Populating an online-centric world comes with new demands, and some compromise is needed. Characters and enemies cast a crisp silhouette to the ground, but now, past a certain distance, all shadows only update at 15 FPS. That's half the game's overall refresh of 30 FPS, making them appear out of sync with the rest of the game. It's not something that really stood out in Fallout 4, and it's apparently a trade-off Fallout 76 needs to make online play work on X. Equally, the resolution on environment shadows don't hold up too well up close, and shadows are removed entirely while indoors, with shade only provided by ambient occlusion. All told then, world detail is great at a distance, but aspects like shadows and textures aren't holding up at this point. Some of this could be fixed come release, notably the pop-in. Other parts of its design stay in place from Fallout 4, including the lack of shadows while indoors, which suggests for now that's how it may stay by release. It begs the question, how much of a performance hit would boosting the texture quality or shadows incur to Xbox One X? Especially while indoors, where the native res is clearly free to make the most of the GPU with a full 4K image, it suggests the hardware does have headroom. The power is there, and hopefully it'll be tapped into more come the beta. Great material lighting was a standout feature of Fallout 4, and that's most certainly back in 76. There's a true-to-life tone to rock, tree bark, and the soft, diffused look on Blue Vault uniforms. One particular highlight is that crisp, reflective metal sheen on the droids roaming the vaults. All of that returns, and it's a delight seeing Bethesda's approach to rendering realistic materials, this time focusing on the landmarks of West Virginia. The last game also introduced a superb volumetric lighting effect. God rays are a demanding setting on PC for Fallout 4, and that's back here too at a high level of quality on X. Fallout 76 marks a change in the way some post effects are managed as well, with mixed results. Screen space dirt and debris on the lens looks great, as does the changing exposure levels as you emerge from a vault. However, bloom is visibly tweaked since the last Fallout. The premise of the game carries some explanation for this. It presents the world just after nuclear war. While the buildings are intact, radiation levels are at a high. An exaggerated bloom is seemingly used to represent that. The effect is heavy and unnatural, and even bright patches of soil bleed light onto foreground objects. It creates a surreal, hazy effect the series has boasted since Fallout 3, but it's especially pronounced this time. Is this how we want Fallout 76 to look though? Well, that bloom effect is a big visual feature, but arguably it's overdone in places. Take the hotel for instance. The pairing of white walls and heavy bloom means the entire scene is completely oversaturated. Intentional or not, it doesn't look quite right, and with the low grade textures and shadows, it's one of the weaker looking areas of the preview build.
Variety of hydrotherapy and aromatherapy treatment.
Of course, the creation engine's better features get another runaround. Screen space reflections on water are nicely implemented, and we have its physics system returned too, notably for body ragdolls. Once we reach the end of this preview build too, the Scorched Beast enemies give Xbox One X a good effects workout. Again, it's evocative of Skyrim's dragons, especially since the battle's set to a peaceful valley area filled with trees. Aesthetically, Fallout 76's setting is a nice change of pace, but the bottom line is, the tech returning from Fallout 4 isn't always holding up in this build. Bethesda has confirmed later builds are much improved, so we'll have to see where the final game stands. Right now, Fallout 76 shows changes in native resolution and shadow quality from Fallout 4, and the frame rate is also rarely as solid. You'll have noticed performance is struggling throughout the footage, with stutters and hiccups along the way. We're often well under 30 FPS here, especially in the Flatwoods area, where it can glance the single digits. And while it's too early to put a magnifying glass on the numbers, bearing in mind it's very early code, above all else I hope this can be improved. By all measures, this is a work in progress. For all its flaws in this build though, Fallout 76 at least takes the aspects of the last game that look great, like the strong lighting and material design. Bethesda's pitch for this game is simple. It's a multiplayer Fallout 4 with a brand new setting. It's compelling, but clearly it demands a rebalancing of resource from the team. Technically, it's hard to see this as an absolute evolution of its graphics tech. The goalposts have moved, and the visuals on console here aren't necessarily always changed for the better. Also, there aren't many signs that Xbox One X is getting away with more enhanced visual features than Fallout 4's patch, but it's possible there's more to come in the future. Assuming what we're seeing here of Fallout 76 isn't firmly set in stone, the final release will have more to offer. For now though, if you did enjoy this quick early look at the game, you can support our work by liking and subscribing to our channel. And remember to hit the bell to get notifications of any new video as we post them. The 4K source file to this analysis is on our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. And to get in touch directly with me or the team, Twitter's where you'll find us. But for now, thanks for watching.